in the NFL, you open up the game book, and all of a sudden Derek Carr threw for 328 yards. That tells you what the NFL is today. But I thought, it wasn't the prettiest of wins, but so what? You're in a very difficult AFC North division, and things tightened up dramatically yesterday because obviously Cincinnati was able to get the win over Baltimore. So all of a sudden, all four teams are just, together they're over 500. So this is shaping up as one of the most difficult divisions in football. And if you're going to compete in it, these are the games you have to win. So far, the Browns are. We talked about this stretch dating back weeks. So far, the Browns are 1-2, and now there's another important one with a very bad Tampa Bay team coming to Cleveland.
And I think that, and I don't want to get too much into that right now with still all of this week to go, but that I worry about this week for the fact that much like 2 weeks ago with Jacksonville, as far as now it was different. This week you knew the focus was going to be there because you can't go out and lay an egg against two winless teams. You had too much of your own focus to let that happen. But here now, this is a good test because you slip back into that, hey, we just won a game, we're feeling good about ourselves again, and everybody's going to want, if both teams take care of business this week, you would be Cincinnati, Cleveland, lining up later in the season in a meaningful game. Man, that would be the first time those two teams have played each other in that situation in years. So the natural thing for fans, media, and probably for some of the younger players that haven't learned their lesson yet would be to look ahead to Cincinnati, and they cannot do that. So this is definitely a test from just a couple of weeks ago to see if you can learn your lesson and take care of what you need to take care of.
No, you're right, and this is a chance for Mike Pettin to prove himself again because even though, Tampa Bay's coming in with one win, a little bit different than say Oakland or even Jacksonville because there's more talent on that team. They're probably underachieving a bit. He's one of the best defensive tackles in football. Levante David is a tremendous linebacker. And, obviously the quarterback position, you're going to keep an eye on that because, Mike Glennon didn't play well. Josh McCown's getting healthier, so who knows? They might go back to McCown this week. But there's also the trade deadline looming tomorrow, and Tampa Bay looks like one of the teams looking to sell. They're trying to move Vincent Jackson, trying to, possibly move Deshaun Golston, maybe even Doug Martin, although he got banged up again. So it's a team. It's a team going in the wrong direction. We always talk about when you start going in the wrong direction, how difficult it is to stop it. And Cleveland has to take advantage of that situation. They have to force the issue, and they have to jump on them early.
Look at how they lost that game yesterday. I watched the end of that, and because they carried the end of that after the one game I was watching, and that end of that game struck me as what would happen to a team like the Browns up until this season, as like you said, trending in the wrong direction and losing those type of games. Look at yesterday. I mean, complete the pass. What is that? The first play of overtime there, and bam, here comes Barr, and what a play that was with the way. Literally, that's the way they teach it to you, to rip that ball out, pick it up. And I know Barr, when I saw it, I first thought of you because we talked about that pick at the time that it happened, and he was somebody you really were high on. But boom, gets it, rumbles, bumbles, stumbles his way into the end zone, and just like that, we don't need to go any further in overtime. This thing is over, and but again, that's the way you lose a game, just like that. I mean, 1 second you're starting your drive, the next second the game's over, just like that.
Yeah, it's a tough win, and that's what happens, a tough loss, and that's what happens in the NFL is that, it's just human nature and the fact that when things start heading in the wrong direction, you kind of slump the shoulders and you kind of feel sorry for yourself. And I think Tampa Bay's in that type of situation. They actually didn't play well at all for the majority of the game. They actually had one drive. Minnesota kind of dominated defensively. They had one drive in the fourth quarter. And it was a chance for them to get a win, and all of a sudden they give up a drive late in the game. Minnesota ties it, and then the first play in overtime, as you said. So it's kind of you've been around football teams enough to know what they're thinking in Tampa Bay, and they're thinking, always, when is that other shoe going to drop? And that's the kind of team you want to face, that's kind of feeling sorry for themselves. And it's really a test for the head coach, as I mentioned, because on Cleveland's side, it's a natural inclination, as you saw against Jacksonville, to kind of let up a little bit, say, this team's coming in, we got this. And that's where the head coach has to come in. Part of his job is to manage personalities. Part of his job is to get these players up from week to week. And you see, that might be, we always talk about X's and O's in the NFL. That might be the most difficult part of being a head coach, because you see the vast swings in this league from week to week. Look in the north and what you mentioned, what Ben Roethlisberger was able to do against Indianapolis. But think about how well Indianapolis was playing before, and what they were able to do defensively to Cincinnati. It's just the vast changes from week to week in this league. It's astonishing.
I brought up at the beginning of the show, almost similar to what you said, because somebody in the chat room threw out a comment that the Browns are just as bad as the Raiders because they should have rolled them. And I know that's the natural instinct when you play a team like that, is you should win by 30 points. But I brought up some of the things you did. I'm like, okay, then you explain to me the week-to-week fluctuations and how Seattle can show up one week and get beat by St. Louis, who shows up the next week and looks like they don't remember how to play football. How is that the same team that showed up against Kansas City that beat Seattle the week before? How do the Steelers, who struggled as they did offensively against the Browns just a couple of weeks ago, and then they come out and do 522 yards for Roethlisberger and 5 touchdowns, and then that Colts defense, as you said, had been playing so well, and look at what they did to Cincinnati. I mean, this season, I said it like you did, I think it's more week-to-week volatility, fluctuation, and competitiveness than I think there may have ever been in the league before.
Yeah, and fans tend to overreact. I mean, that's the nature of fan. I mean, that's almost the definition of the word. But this is not college. There are no gimmies. There are no gimmies in the NFL. And forget about a team like Tampa, or look at Oakland. There is a lot of good football players on the Raiders, believe it or not. And if you don't show up, they can beat you. I mean, specifically on the offensive line, Wisniewski's played well this year. Donald Penn has been one of the best acquisitions in all of football. That's how well he's played. James Jones, at wide receiver, can just make big plays.
Same with Holmes.
Charles Woodson, he might be 100 years old, but he just knows how to play the game. Khalil Mack is going to be a star in this league.
Yeah,
Justin Tuck has won Super Bowls. This is not Alabama against, an FBS, FCS team. There are no just walkovers in the NFL. There really isn't. There's a lot of good players on, and you'll see it this week with Tampa Bay. You'll see the same people come out of the woodwork and say, well, Tampa Bay's 1-6. You got to win that game, and all of a sudden you go, "Wow, Gerald McCoy, wow, Levante David," and wait till you see some of those receivers. If Vincent Jackson's there, he might get traded tomorrow. 6'5". Austin Severian Jenkins, the guy who fumbled the ball yesterday.
Yeah, they got big receivers.
He also caught the touchdown to put Tampa Bay on top late in the fourth quarter. Another 6'5" guy, Mike Evans. 3 6'4", 6'5" receivers are coming to Cleveland this week. There are good football players on every single team in the NFL.
You just brought up one of the biggest things that I worry about now, not next week, when after the game, about Tampa. What is the size of those wide receivers that they're lining up there? I mean, and you put Sefarius Jenkins there, man. That was the definition of the life in times of a rookie and the highs and lows that come with it, because to be the guy that gets it there and then loses it there with the fumble, man, like that was the that's just the epitome of it right there, showing that. But and I agree with you. Hey, while we're talking about next week, just a little bit, and this isn't necessarily next week as a going forward question. Before you joined us in the previous segment, I was talking a bit about the Browns running game and how, anybody who does not equate the complete drop-off of the Browns rushing game to the changes in the offensive line, you're nuts. It has nothing to do with the teams that they're playing or whatever, because the teams before tried to stop the run against the Browns too. There's clearly a huge drop-off in the run game, which we knew would happen. But now that they made the change this week, they put McDonald back in at center, which is at least a natural center. You and I talked a bit about that possibility last week, and you've got Greco back into his guard spot. Do you think, I personally think with a couple of weeks, if nobody else gets injured and they're able to work together as an offensive line, they can get that running attack going again? It won't be 5.9 yards a carry again. You're not going to get there, but this offensive line is now just going to need a couple of weeks to gel together, especially with that zone blocking scheme of being able to get back on that same page. But do you agree with my assessment, or is it the function of the defenses that the Browns have played, or did they just forget how to run the ball, as some people would think? What do you equate there with the Browns running attack, and does it get itself going again?
Well, no, you're right. It's the result of this week I'll be doing my mid-season All-Pro team, and the center's going to be Alex Mack. You don't lose a player like that. We've talked about it in the past, and expect to just go along with no hiccups. And I kind of agree with you on the mentality that, if only for the fact that, if I look at the individual players, I probably would rather have Paul McQuiston out there than Nick McDonald as an individual player. But what that accomplishes, instead of unsettling two different positions, you only have the one unsettled position as far as center, and you enable John Greco to go back to his natural position. So that part of it I like. But the bottom line is again, you're not going to replace the production of Alex Mack. That's not the way it works. And you're going to have to overcome some of these hurdles, and that's what the good teams do in this league.
I agree with you. You're listening to the Sports Fix. John McMullen from the Sports Network with us here. We're talking a bit about the Browns here and their victory, ugly as it may be, over the Raiders. They're looking ahead to Tampa Bay. Last couple of questions about the Browns here. I want to talk to you about some of the other games too. Brian Hoyer, obviously there was a lot of focus. I thought it was important for the Browns, obviously, to win that game, but for the quarterback position to be stable, you win the game with a sub 50% performance. A win is a win, but that would have only continued to fuel the garbage talk that's been going on. I thought yesterday was if you want to break down the minutiae of throw by throw, there were some off throws, obviously. But at the end of the day, 19 of 28, 275, touchdown, no interceptions. That works, and I believe that quieted a lot of that down.
As well it should, and I've said, as long as the Browns remain in this thing, there's no even reason to have the discussion as far as making a change at the quarterback position. So winning is important, and obviously the most important. How you win, the style points that we talked about, is of no concern. It shouldn't be of any concern. It's certainly of no concern to Mike Pettin. So as long as the team is heading in the right direction, there's a reason they chose Brian Hoyer, and we all know it. There's no use to drudge all that up again, and Johnny Manziel didn't put himself in a position to fight for that job, and now he's going to have to wait, and that's just the nature of the NFL. And obviously, when you're talking about a team that's 4-3 in the thick of the playoff hunt in a very difficult division, you're not going to think about changing the quarterback. It doesn't make sense.
Tell you what, I just got a comment in the chat room talking about some of the things you just said. Said, where's all the media that said Mack wasn't worth the money when he wanted it? I'm like, brother, I was getting called an idiot because I was told you don't spend that kind of money